Have you ever been laughed at for something you were passionate about? That moment when your cheeks burn, your stomach drops, and you question everything about yourself. Well, I still remember the exact sound of Vanessa Mitchell's laughter echoing through the science lab when she saw my project. But what she didn't know was that her mockery would fuel the greatest comeback of my high school life. Stay with me to discover how I turned humiliation into triumph, and why I shocked everyone when I said her name at the moment of my victory. Welcome to Plot Twist Life, where real stories of unexpected turns and incredible comebacks show you that life's greatest moments often happen after the darkest times. Before I dive into how a crushed spirit became an unstoppable force, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that will inspire you to persevere through your own challenges. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. It was junior year at Westlake High, and I was the definition of average. Not popular, not unpopular, just existing in that vast middle ground of high school hierarchy. I wasn't a star athlete or a debate champion. But there was one thing I truly loved: science. More specifically, environmental engineering. While other kids had posters of bands or athletes on their walls, I had diagrams of sustainable city designs and water filtration systems. My dad used to joke that I was born with a recycling bin in one hand and a beaker in the other. When Mr. Bronson announced the annual science fair, I felt a spark of excitement I hadn't experienced in a long time. This year's theme was Sustainable Solutions for Local Problems, and I immediately knew what I wanted to do. Our town had been struggling with water quality issues in the local river for years. Nobody seemed to care much, except when it made the news briefly each summer when algae blooms made the river unusable. For 3 weeks straight, I spent every spare moment in my garage, working on a biofiltration system that could be implemented at key pollution entry points. It wasn't just a model. I had actually built a working prototype using materials most people throw away: old plastic containers, discarded pipes from my uncle's plumbing business, and a filtering mechanism made from layers of natural materials I'd researched meticulously. My parents were supportive, but bewildered. "James," my mom would say, poking her head into the garage at midnight, "you need to sleep sometime." But how could I sleep when I was too excited about testing different natural filtration media and measuring contaminant reduction rates? The night before project submissions were due, I was still fine-tuning my system. I had data charts showing the filtration efficiency, cost analyses proving it was economically viable, and even water samples showing the before and after results. This wasn't just a school project for me. It was the beginning of something that could actually help our community. I arrived at school that morning, sleep-deprived but exhilarated, carefully carrying my project to the science lab. Students were setting up their displays throughout the room: volcanoes, solar ovens, the usual suspects. And then there was Vanessa Mitchell's project. Vanessa was everything I wasn't. Smart, yes, but also effortlessly popular and intimidatingly confident. Her father was some kind of environmental scientist at the university, and she had access to lab equipment most high schoolers could only dream of. Her project was a sleek, professional-looking display about atmospheric carbon capture, complete with 3D printed models and digital interactive elements. I was setting up my decidedly homemade-looking project on a table near the window when I heard her voice behind me. "Is that garbage?" she asked. Her perfect eyebrows arched in amusement. I turned around, clutching my recycled plastic containment vessel. "It's a biofiltration system," I explained, trying to sound confident, "for cleaning the Westlake River." That's when it happened. She laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a full theatrical laugh that seemed designed to draw attention. And it worked. Several heads turned our way. "You're trying to clean up the river with trash. That's actually kinda sad," she said, just loud enough for others to hear. Her friends joined in the laughter, and I felt myself shrinking with each passing second. The project I had poured my heart into was being reduced to a joke before the competition had even begun. "Good luck with your trash project," she said with mock encouragement, patting my shoulder as she walked away, leaving me standing there, my face burning with humiliation. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Vanessa's laughter, seeing the pity in Mr. Bronson's eyes when he stopped by my table after the incident. Even my parents' encouragement fell flat. "They just don't understand innovation," my dad said over dinner. But I knew the truth. My project looked amateur compared to Vanessa's high-tech display. Around midnight, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed. It was an article my grandfather had sent me. He was always sending random science stories he thought would interest me. This one was about a man in Bangladesh who had created a water filtration system using locally available materials that had transformed his village's access to clean water. I opened the link, expecting to skim it quickly, but found myself fully engaged. The man hadn't used fancy equipment or cutting-edge technology. He'd used what was available, what was sustainable, and what could be easily replicated by others. And it worked. Something shifted inside me as I read. I realized I had been looking at my project all wrong. Yes, it was made of recycled materials. Yes, it looked homemade. But that wasn't a weakness. It was its greatest strength. I jumped out of bed and pulled out my presentation materials. If the judges were anything like Vanessa, they might dismiss my project based on appearances. I needed to reframe everything to help them see what I now saw clearly. A solution that was accessible, replicable, and sustainable, not just environmentally, but economically and socially. I worked through the night, completely overhauling my presentation. I emphasized how every component could be sourced locally and cheaply. I calculated the cost difference between my system and commercial alternatives. I created a simple instructional guide showing how community members could build their own filters. When my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I hadn't slept a minute. But I had transformed my project from an apology into a declaration. This wasn't just a science fair entry anymore. It was a viable community solution. The preliminary judging was that afternoon. 3 judges from the local university would be evaluating all 32 projects, and only 10 would move on to the finals the following day. I set up my display with new confidence, arranging my recycled materials with pride rather than embarrassment. Vanessa's station was directly across from mine, her professionally printed backboard gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She caught my eye as I was setting up and gave me a small, dismissive smile. "Still in the competition?" she asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "More than ever," I replied, with a confidence that seemed to catch her off guard. The judging began at 1 p.m. I watched as the judges, 2 professors and an environmental engineer, made their way around the room, spending varying amounts of time at each station. When they reached Vanessa's display, they stayed for nearly 15 minutes, nodding and taking notes as she expertly walked them through her carbon capture innovation. By the time they reached my table, I was a bundle of nerves but determined. I didn't just walk them through my display. I told them a story. A story about a river that generations of families had once enjoyed but now avoided. About how conventional solutions were too expensive for our town's budget. About how my system could be built and maintained by community members themselves, creating not just cleaner water, but a sense of ownership and pride. I demonstrated the filtration in real time, pouring a sample of river water through my system and showing the dramatic difference in clarity and reduced contaminant levels. I explained how different natural filtration media could be calibrated for different types of pollutants. And I handed them my cost-benefit analysis, showing how a network of these systems could improve water quality for a fraction of the cost of industrial solutions. The judges asked question after question, and for each one, I had a thoughtful, well-researched answer. When they finally moved on, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa watching us, her expression unreadable. At 4 p.m., Mr. Bronson gathered everyone around to announce the 10 finalists. I held my breath as he read the names. Vanessa Mitchell, he called out, to no one's surprise. More names followed, each one increasing the tightness in my chest. He was reading them in no particular order, and as the list grew longer, 7, 8, 9 names, my hope began to fade. And our final finalist, Mr. Bronson said, pausing dramatically, James Anderson. The final round of judging would take place the next day, with 3 new judges, including Dr. Eleanor Chen, a renowned environmental scientist whose work I had followed since middle school. The stakes were higher, the competition fiercer, and the night before, I found myself once again unable to sleep. But this time, it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was inspiration. I realized there was one element missing from my presentation: real-world application. The judges needed to see that this wasn't just theoretical. I called my Uncle Mike at 10 p.m., asking if I could borrow his pickup truck. By midnight, I was at the river's edge, setting up a larger version of my filtration system at one of the most polluted drainage points. I collected water samples before and after filtration, carefully documenting everything with time-stamped photos and detailed notes. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I finally got home, muddied and exhausted, but exhilarated. I had real-world data now, not just from a controlled environment, but from the actual river. I spent the remaining hours before dawn updating my presentation materials and preparing a new demonstration. When I arrived at school that morning, the atmosphere in the science lab was electric. The remaining 10 contestants were all bringing their A game, making last-minute adjustments to their displays. Vanessa was there early too, her father helping her set up what looked like a new addition to her already impressive display. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and I was surprised when she gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't friendly, exactly, but there was a hint of respect there that hadn't existed before. The judging began at 10 a.m. This time, each finalist would give a 5-minute presentation to the judges and audience, followed by questions. We drew numbers for presentation order. Vanessa would be 4th, and I would be last. I watched the other presentations with genuine interest. There were some truly innovative projects, everything from new approaches to biodegradable plastics to a fascinating study on urban heat islands, but none addressed the immediate local need like mine did. When Vanessa's turn came, she was nothing short of brilliant. Her presentation was polished, her knowledge impressive, and her carbon capture technology genuinely innovative. She spoke confidently about global climate solutions and potential commercial applications. The audience was captivated, and the judges nodded approvingly. Her father beamed from the front row. As the presentations continued, I mentally rehearsed mine, making small adjustments based on what seemed to resonate with the judges. When my name was finally called, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "What you see before you might look like junk," I began, gesturing to my recycled materials. "That's what someone told me when they first saw this project." I paused, letting my gaze briefly meet Vanessa's in the audience. And they weren't entirely wrong. These are materials that were headed for landfills, but today I'm going to show you how this junk can restore life to our river. I launched into my presentation, showing not just the before and after samples from my controlled tests, but also the dramatic results from my midnight expedition to the river. I passed around the water samples, inviting the judges and audience members to see and even smell the difference. "This system costs less than $50 to build," I explained. "It can be maintained by anyone with an hour of training, and it can be implemented at every major pollution entry point in our river for less than the cost of a single industrial filtration system." I then unveiled my final element, a simple, illustrated guide I had created for community members to build their own systems. "This isn't just about cleaning the river," I said. It's about empowering our community to take environmental restoration into their own hands. The room was silent when I finished. Then Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "have you tested this system against industrial runoff containing heavy metals?" My heart raced. This wasn't something I had explicitly tested, but I had researched it extensively. "The current configuration is optimized for organic pollutants and sediment," I admitted. "But by substituting the third filtration layer with activated carbon and introducing a zeolite component, the system can be adapted for heavy metal filtration with only a $10 increase in cost." I proceeded to explain the chemical processes involved, drawing on research I had devoured during my late-night study sessions. Dr. Chen's eyebrows raised slightly, and she exchanged glances with the other judges. The questioning continued for several minutes, each question more challenging than the last. But for each one, I had a thoughtful, researched response. When my time was finally up, I returned to my seat, mentally exhausted but proud. I had given it everything I had. The judges deliberated for what felt like an eternity. We finalists sat together in the front row, an awkward mix of nervous energy and forced politeness. Vanessa sat 2 seats away from me, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing toward the room where the judges were meeting. "Your river project is actually pretty clever," she said suddenly, not looking up from her phone. I turned to her surprised. "Thanks. Your carbon capture system is impressive." She shrugged. "My dad did most of the technical design." There was something in her voice, not quite resentment, but perhaps a hint of restraint. Before I could respond, the judges returned to the room, and Mr. Bronson called for our attention. "Before we announce the winners," he said, "I want to congratulate all of our finalists. The level of innovation and dedication we've seen today represents the very best of Westlake High." There was polite applause as Mr. Bronson explained that there would be 3 places awarded, along with an honorable mention. The honorable mention went to a sophomore whose project analyzed microplastics in local food sources. A truly worthy project. 3rd place went to a senior whose biodegradable plastic alternative showed real commercial potential. 2nd place, Mr. Bronson announced, goes to Vanessa Mitchell for her atmospheric carbon capture innovation. Vanessa's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly, as she walked forward to accept her trophy and certificate. There was enthusiastic applause, especially from her father, but I could see the disappointment in her posture. Vanessa Mitchell didn't do 2nd place. And 1st place in this year's Westlake High Science Fair goes to... The pause was excruciating. James Anderson for his community-based river restoration system. The applause was deafening, or maybe that was just the blood rushing in my ears. I stood up, almost in a daze, and made my way to the front. Dr. Chen handed me the trophy, her eyes bright with approval. "Excellent work, Mr. Anderson," she said. "This is exactly the kind of practical, community-oriented solution we need more of." Mr. Bronson handed me the microphone for the customary brief acceptance speech. I looked out at the audience. My beaming parents, my classmates, the judges. And Vanessa, her expression carefully neutral. In that moment, something unexpected happened inside me. The triumph I had been craving, the vindication against Vanessa's mockery. It suddenly felt hollow. Because I realized something important. Her laughter, painful as it had been, had ultimately pushed me to make my project better. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. This project started out as just an idea, and it became something much more meaningful to me. And I need to thank someone who probably doesn't realize the impact she had. I took a breath, my next word surprising even myself. Vanessa Mitchell. A murmur went through the audience. Vanessa's eyes widened. When Vanessa laughed at my project, calling it trash, it forced me to confront the weaknesses in my presentation and to find the real strength in my approach. Without that moment, I might not have pushed myself to prove that sometimes the most elegant solutions don't come from expensive labs, but from reimagining the resources we already have. The room was silent now. So thank you, Vanessa, for pushing me to be better. And thank you to the judges for recognizing that innovation doesn't always come in the most polished package. As I stepped down from the podium, the applause resumed, even stronger than before, and as I walked back to my seat, I passed Vanessa. Our eyes met, and after a moment of shock, she gave me a small, genuine smile, the first real one I'd ever received from her. After the ceremony, as people were mingling and examining the projects one last time, Vanessa approached me. "That was unexpected," she said. "Yeah, well, it was true," I replied. She looked at my project again, this time with genuine interest. "How did you determine the optimal layering for the filtration media?" And just like that, we were talking, really talking, about environmental engineering. No mockery, no competition, just two people passionate about solving problems. As we discussed potential improvements to both our projects, her father joined us, introducing himself and asking detailed questions about my filtration system. By the end of the conversation, he had offered me a summer internship at his lab, an opportunity I never would have dreamed possible a day earlier. Walking to my parents' car later, trophy in hand, I realized something profound. Sometimes your greatest critics can become your most important catalysts. Vanessa's laughter had hurt, but it had also fueled a determination in me that I never knew I possessed. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable prize of all. That science fair changed the trajectory of my life. The internship led to a scholarship, which led to a degree in environmental engineering, and eventually to a career developing accessible clean water solutions for communities around the world. And it all started with someone laughing at my trash project. Sometimes the moments that feel like our greatest humiliations become the foundations of our greatest triumphs, but only if we choose to use that pain as fuel rather than let it extinguish our passion. If you've ever been laughed at for your dreams or your ideas, I hope this story reminds you that those moments don't define you. Your response to them does. Subscribe to Plot Twist Life for more stories of unexpected turns and powerful comebacks that might just change your perspective on your own challenges. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their setback could be setting them up for something amazing. Until next time, remember that the best plot twists in life often come after the moments we thought would break us.